Hey, I'm Jet, and welcome to today's EDH Deck Tech video. Today I'm going to be talking about a commander who just got spoiled for the newest set, Dominaria United, Xira the Golden Stink. Xira is a 3/3 insect assassin with flying and haste that costs Jund and 1 colorless. She has the ability, whenever Xira attacks, put an egg counter on another target creature without an egg counter on it. Whenever a creature dies, if it had an egg counter on it, draw a card and create a 1/1 insect creature with flying. I've mostly seen this deck built in a more of an aristocrats kind of strategy, but for this deck tech we're going to be doing something a little bit more janky with insect tribal. First, let's talk about some insects that we're going to include in this deck. First off, we have Caustic Caterpillar and Masked Vandal, who are going to be useful in any cases that we might need emergency, artifact, or enchantment removal. And then Realm Walker is going to be useful for letting us cast insects off the top of our library. Next up, we have some insects that will generate us creature tokens. First off with Scute Swarm as landfall that will create 1/1 insects, Ant Queen that can pay 2 mana to create 1/1 insects, and then Iridescent Horn Beetle that has at the beginning of your end step create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each 1/1 counter that you've put on creatures under your control this turn. Hornet Queen will create us 4 1/1 insect creature tokens with flying and death touch, and Broodhatch, Nantuko, and Saber Ants both create insect creature tokens whenever they deal damage. In this deck, we will be creating a lot of creature tokens, so Parallel Lives and Doubling Season are going to be useful for doubling up all the insects that we create. Since we are going for a tribal theme, Door of Destinies, Coat of Arms, and Obelisk of Erd will be able to make all of our small token creatures much bigger. Next up, let's talk about some of the cards that we got that want us to be sacrificing our creature tokens. Mazarek Crawl Death Priest is a 2/2 flyer with, whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that you control. Victimize is going to let us return 2 creatures from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped, just for the price of 3 mana and sacrificing a creature. The next sacrifice outlet that we have is Goblin Bombardment, which lets us sacrifice a creature to deal 1 damage to any target. While these next couple cards aren't exclusively sacrificed, they're definitely worth mentioning. We got Skullclamp, Mortarvine Reclamation, and Fecundity, which are all good for drawing a lot of cards. Next up, we got a couple cards that care about what cards are in our graveyard. First, there's Grist Hungertide that has a +1 loyalty ability that says create an insect creature token, then mill a card, then repeat this process if the card that you milled is an insect. Old Rutskin has, whenever he enters the battlefield or at the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card, and then depending on what card's milled, you will either get an insect token, a treasure token, or a blood token. And lastly, we got Azoni Thousand-Eyed, which has Undergrowth. When it enters the battlefield, create an insect token for each creature card that's in your graveyard. I'm trying to get as much value out of Xira's abilities as we can. I think there's a couple artifacts and enchantments that'll go a long way. We got Strionic Resonator and Lithoform Engine, both being able to copy Xira's triggered ability. Then there's Home of the Host, which if equipped to Xira at the beginning of our combat, will be able to make an additional copy of her. And then last up, we got Aggravated Assault, which can grant additional combat phases to trigger Xira's ability. Now the last thing we're going to talk about is important synergies and win cons for this deck. First, we're going to throw in Perforos, God of the Forge, which deals damage to our opponents whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control. With the amount of tokens we're going to be generating, this can get out of hand really quickly. Next up, we got Blasphemous Act, which we can pair with Broodhatch, Nantuko, or Saber Ants. These creatures will end up giving you a lot of tokens in this situation that will leave most of the other players with an empty board. And then if you already have an established board presence, you could even throw in Heroic Intervention, which will grant your permanents hexproof and indestructible, which will keep the damage from being lethal. And the last combo that we have is Mazarek Crawl Death Priest, Murderous Redcap, and Phyrexian Altar. After you sacrifice Murderous Redcap to Phyrexian Altar, you can have it re-enter the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it thanks to Persist. Mazarek will put a +1/+1 counter on Murderous Deathcap, which will negate the -1/-1 counter from Persist, allowing you to sacrifice it repeatedly. And that's going to be it for today's EDH Deck Tech video. The full deck list will be in the description below at moxfold.com. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, please consider liking and subscribing. It'll help me out immensely and it'll keep you updated for when new videos come out. Have a good day.